Still new. So thanks for everyone on our Brand Innovators community for joining us as we're going to be closing out and continuing the conversation around consumer engagement today. And more specifically, Katrina and I will be talking about the role of consumer engagement in building brands. I think for those who know Katrina and I personally, we share what I would call like a healthy obsession with consumer engagement, right, Katrina? It's
I'd like to think so, yeah.
something we're very, very passionate about on a personal level. But we also represent companies who are deeply committed to engaging consumers in a way that not only exceeds consumer expectation, but really drives the business. And so a little bit of level setting for those who are joining us today, and you're not familiar with Freeosk, I'm proud that we are the only omni-channel discovery platform that is about curating memorable and importantly measurable brand engagements across a variety of physical and digital touch points. And so the core of our consumer engagement really starts with our automated sampling kiosk. And we have over 1,400 kiosks nationwide. You may have seen them at your local Sam's Club, Walmart, Albertsons, and a few other retailers coming on board. And from there, we're able to really surround the shopper with digital products that enable our brand partners to have continued dialogue with those interested consumers. And so for me, that's the most exciting part about consumer engagement, is taking those real world intent signals, translating that first moment of consumer engagement into actionable insights. Now, on the Mondelēz side, I think brands that need no introduction and certainly are always reinventing the definition of brand engagement. But Katrina, folks are probably not as familiar with some of the new innovative work that's coming out, particularly in SnackFutures. So let's start there. Can you tell us a little bit about SnackFutures? What is it? How long has it been around? And how does something so innovative find itself in such a large multinational company?
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay? Just sound check before I start. Great. Okay. So many of you probably know Mondelēz International. If you don't know Mondelēz International, you definitely know some of our bigger brands around the world like Oreo, Ritz, Cadbury, Milka, Trident Gum, some beloved snacking brands for consumers. And at Mondelēz International, our purpose is to empower people to snack right. And that's about providing the right snack made the right way for the right moments. And obviously, all of our brands are continually looking to evolve and engage with consumers and grow with consumers and meet consumers' changing needs. SnackFutures, which is where I work in Mondelēz, is our innovation and venture hub that was founded in late 2018. And what our mandate is really to kind of help define the future of snacking and figure out how we can meet consumers where they're going and co-create the future of snacking, really, when it comes to especially well-being and sustainability. So we do that in three key ways. So we have sort of three pillars within SnackFutures. Invent, so invent, innovate, create our own brands. Venture, literally make venture investments in startups. So some of those that we've made are Uplift Foods, Hue. So Hue ultimately resulted in a full-on acquisition, but it started with a venture investment by our SnackFutures team, and then Tor Food Tech out of Israel. So those are three of the venture investments we've made. And then the third pillar is amplify, and that's something that's new to us this year, where we're looking to amplify the impact of SnackFutures by partnering with startups and helping coach and mentor them. And it's a little bit of a sort of incubator model where we're working with 9 startups new to our program this year. So that's kind of how we're doing this, what we're doing. And so some of the brands that we've invented, and that's where I work in the invent pillar, we've invented 5 brands in the US and Europe, including Dirt Kitchen Snacks, which is what I'm going to talk a bit about today because that's what I'm leading, Kapow, Milligram, Nokoe, and Ruckus & Co. And these are brands that we are entrepreneurs. We're creating startups from within Mondelēz, leveraging internal and external ecosystems to invent the brands, co-create them with consumers, validate them, and then begin to incubate and grow them, hopefully to a point where we can scale them and then kind of make them part of the bigger Mondelēz, the mothership, as I call it.
Yeah. And so having that innovation arm internally, I imagine, allows you to take a different, fresh approach, maybe non-conventional ways to engage consumers and build brands. So what does that look like, or what has it looked like for you moving from insight to actually bringing that product to market?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm going to talk a lot about Dirt Kitchen because it's an interesting case study, and it's the one that I've been leading, so I know the most intimately. But we started Dirt Kitchen with a consumer need that we were looking to fulfill. We started with what we call demand spaces. I'm sure everyone from a big CPG has some kind of structure or the way they organize the world and how they look at white space, but ours are called demand spaces. And we started with an adult afternoon reset occasion, which has both functional and emotional needs for consumers. So you're looking for a bit of an energy boost to kind of get you through the rest of the day, bridge between lunch and dinner. Maybe it's a break from work or from errands or from childcare or whatever's happening in the afternoon. So there's a lot of functional need, but there's also emotional needs. And you're looking for, either satisfy a craving or a hit of crunch or something to uplift your mood. And we wanted to satisfy these needs, particularly for health-oriented consumers. And so when we sort of clashed together this health-oriented consumer and this need, it took us to a savory space and to specifically vegetables. So we had this insight that people want to get more vegetables in their lives. And so we thought, can we bring vegetables into snacking? So then we went to kind of go co-create this idea with consumers. So we started with a little bit more what I would call more traditional qualitative bundle building co-creation labs with consumers. And we progressed from there into a few phases of what we call transactional learning, test and learn. It's learning by selling real food or real things to real people. So rather than spending like 3 years to develop something in a traditional innovation way with stage gates and all this, we literally tried to get a minimally lovable proposition. It's a minimally viable proposition, but a little slightly higher bar because it's food and it's intimate. And we really want to sort of raise the bar. We want consumers to love the food that we're creating. So, work to get a minimally lovable proposition and then start selling it. But start selling it with hypotheses and questions and do experiments to try to answer those questions. And so we did that through several phases. So I would say in the early bundle building qualitative, we did a bunch of groups in New York and Denver. So we started in New York. We started with a bunch of stimulus and a bunch of ideas and sort of narrowed down as we went. We validated and refined the insight throughout that. And that insight of, yes, people are trying to get more vegetables into their lives, but really crystallized into was, yes, I'm trying to get more vegetables into my life because they're a great way to help meet my health goals. But like they weren't even thinking about veggies when it came to snacking because veggies just weren't exciting enough or interesting enough to be a snack. So that insight became, vegetables are a great way to meet my health goals, but they're not tasty or convenient enough to be a snack. So that kind of became our North Star of how do we actually make a snack that makes real vegetables into an exciting snack. That insight got crystallized within the first couple co-creation groups with consumers. And so we just kept building on it from there. And we came out of those labs with a bundle that we felt was a minimally lovable proposition. We had a little bit more work we had to do on it, a little more iteration before we could start selling, but we did that iteration. We made a batch, and then we decided to go online and into e-commerce and try to validate the bundle. We ended up on Amazon instead of D2C. We wanted to do D2C, but for a variety of technical reasons, it was just quicker to go to Amazon. And our purpose was to kind of validate that insight, validate that we could find consumers online who were motivated by our messaging and send them to Amazon and get them to buy our product. So we had a series of sort of hypotheses set up and checked. So that became our concept test. We didn't do bases. We didn't do any sort of traditional concept testing. Our concept test was click-through rates on our digital advertising in Facebook and Instagram. And so proof of concept, that was our purpose on Amazon. Because the data isn't quite as rich on Amazon as it would have been on a D2C site, and we knew we wouldn't be able to sort of have those more intimate conversations with consumers, we also went to a farmer's market. And so this was like my dream as a big company marketer to actually like sell food at a farmer's market. we've been talking to startups for years and asking them about their story and how did they get started. And so many were like, well, I had this problem I was trying to solve for myself. So I made this food and then I fed it to some of my friends and they thought it was great and they thought I should start selling it. So I made some and then I went to the farmer's market. And like literally almost every startup we talked to back, 5+ years ago, it's like we went to the farmer's market and we sold our food and we talked to consumers and asked them how they liked it and how did it fit into their lives. And I was like, I want to do this. Why can't I do this? So we did that. And the purpose there was to sort of get those rich qualitative insights from consumers about how could this fit into your life. We got good feedback from those two things, and I'll talk some more about the learnings later, but the next phase became, okay, great. We did pretty well on e-com. We did pretty well at a farmer's market. Is this bundle shelf ready? Will it move off the shelf in a brick and mortar environment? So that became sort of the next phase of transactional learning was, and we had a second product line that had been developed in parallel by one of my colleagues. So we also were like, can we put these two product lines together into one brand? And is it shelf ready? So we moved into brick and mortar in a small test market in Los Angeles. And we had 4 weeks of good data and then COVID shut the world down. So we pivoted again to D2C this time. We were able to get that up and running and kind of at that point we felt good about the velocities that we had seen in those 4 weeks. We felt good about the retailer acceptance. And then it became sort of refining the bundle. So again, we're this whole time we're selling, refining the bundle, getting the pricing right, getting the mix right, and in order to enable us to sort of pull together what we felt was a legit brand to go then into incubation and start growing the brand. So that's like how we did things, definitely different than how I've innovated in the past in the big company world, because literally we were, always engaging with consumers and learning process, but literally like real world engaging with consumers, buying advertising, sending them to our website, getting them to buy, figuring out why they're not buying if they're not buying. And it's really been this whole process of engaging with consumers in order to learn and build the brand from day one.
Yeah. I think there are probably those of us who have been on innovation, and when you said didn't use bases, it's like, that must have been terrifying. Or, hearing Amazon and farmers market in the same sentence and building a brand, it's a very untraditional and unconventional way to go about it. So when you think about listening to consumers, I love this idea of engaging, really meeting a need, meeting retailer needs, but then also being able to adapt as you go along. So holding what's true and what ends up being right for the consumer, but then being able to evolve everything around it. How did you find that balance, and how were you able to really synthesize those insights in real time?
Yeah, I mean, this is where I sound like a really big nerd, because it literally was like scientific method. I mean, we with our learning partner, so Sparkstarter Studio is the learning partner that we worked with. Deb Biccarelli was like, I think we spent hours on the phone together every week, because literally we approached every week with, okay, what are the hypotheses that we're trying to validate this week? What are we trying to learn this week? What are the experiments that we're doing in order to validate or invalidate those hypotheses? We would run the experiments. We would look at the data. We would say, okay, what have we learned? Did we validate our hypothesis? Okay, cool. Let's move on to the next one. Did we invalidate it? Okay, why? Let's peel back the onion. And it's been interesting as we've taken a step back and reflected on it today, because you actually learn more when you invalidate your hypotheses than when you validate them, because of that confirmation bias, right? So you're like, okay, yeah, I thought this, we validated it, we were right, okay, let's move on, versus, oh, we weren't right. Why weren't we right? What do we think is happening? What could be creating this? And then creating more experiments to try to figure out if that why is correct, or pivoting and doing something totally different. So it's really been an interesting and quite scientific process of sort of iterating and going through these learnings. I mean, we were doing things like A/B testing of literally parallel websites. We have an A and a B version. We're buying the advertising on Facebook. We're sending people to randomly 50% to the A, 50% to the B with 2 different price points, and doing weeks and weeks of that to build pricing curves to try to figure out where we should price the bundle, things like that. So it's been an interesting mix of quantitative data and also intuition, really, to be able to make the decisions and move forward on a weekly basis. And the other key thing was like having the right people in the room to be like looking at the data, talking about what we felt we needed to do next. Can it be done? Yes, it can be done. Okay, let's go do it. If it can't be done, why not? And what can be done? So it was like the all hands on deck sort of agile, little a agile, not big a agile, but more agile approach of just being able to iterate that bundle, whether it was making product or packaging changes or price pack architecture changes, or even the easier things to do are marketing messaging and imagery and stuff like that. Does that answer your question?
Sure did. I mean, you had me at scientific methodology, so I'm right there with you.
We love hypotheses.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about the brand. So talk about what are the flavors? What can consumers expect? For those of us who haven't had a chance to have it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually thinking as I was rambling that I should have done that at the beginning. So thank you for prompting me.
Funny you say that, Katrina.
Oh, yay!
I happened to buy them online. So I have all 6 flavors. So I'm also going to ask you the annoying question of what's your favorite flavor?
Oh, that's not annoying at all.
But talk to us about, there's 6 flavors. Is that right?
Yes, there are actually. Thank you for doing that, because I can't seem to keep any in the house around here because they get eaten. So Dirt Kitchen Snacks, we have 2 lineups. We've got air-dried veggie crisps. So Dilini, if you want to hold up a big bag, air-dried veggie crisps are simply seasoned. They're actually made from rescued veggies, so upcycling veggies that would have gone to waste. So a nice sustainability story there, helping to reduce food waste. But they are air-dried veggies. They're crispy, crunchy, kind of a fun texture to munch on. These are all simply seasoned with extra virgin olive oil, sea salt. There's a little bit of black pepper on the zucchini, but it's zucchini. Blushed bell peppers. Blushed bell peppers are peppers that are halfway ripe between green and red. Fun fact of the day about vegetables: red peppers and green peppers are the same pepper. The red ones are riper. And when they're halfway ripe, stores don't want to buy them because stores only sell green peppers and red peppers. They don't sell blushed peppers. So we buy the blushed peppers and we make them into blushed bell pepper crisps. So if you open up that bag, you have a mix of green and red and something in between in there.
My mind was just blown. I've always wondered that.
Right? Fun fact about veggies of the day. And then the grape tomatoes, the third one is grape tomatoes. And so grape tomatoes and zucchini, if any of you live in the Northeast, you know that around this time of year, your gardens start going a little bit crazy with zucchinis and grape tomatoes. So those tend to be surplus, where just the farms have too many and they can't be sold. And so we buy them and air dry them and make them into crisps before they can go to rot on the farm. So that's the story about the crisps. And then the air dried veggies and nuts are, it's funny, this is the one where the positioning evolved a little bit. So the original thought on the air dried veggies and nuts was like interesting combinations of veggies and nuts. And when you put them together, it's this really fun snack. And the interesting combinations thing kind of went away over time. That wasn't as motivating. It literally, and our tagline is snackably delicious veggies. They are real recognizable veggies made into delicious, crispy, crunchy snacks. So the air-dried veggies and nuts have a little bit more of a culinary inspiration. They were actually inspired by when you cook in the kitchen with vegetables, oftentimes you don't have to do a whole lot to them, but a lot of veggie dishes and side dishes that are really interesting have veggies and nuts in them. Mm-hmm. So the green beans and almonds, if you want to hold up that one, that was the original product that we came up with when we were doing our bundle building labs. And that was inspired by green bean almondine, which is an Italian-American side dish that my family cooks at every holiday. In real life, it's green beans, almonds, maybe a little bit of shallots, butter, garlic, slivered almonds, and a squeeze of lemon. So we sort of made that into a snack. One of the things we learned early on with that one too, as we presented the brand to the world, was that consumers were actually looking for it to be vegan. Everything else in the brand was vegan. That one was not, because there was butter in the seasoning. But as we were talking about plant-based snacking, one of the early learnings was like, okay, if you're talking about plant-based snacking, it's like, you kind of got to be vegan. So we reformulated that one. So there's no butter in it anymore. It is now kind of a garlic and onion and sea salt seasoning. And then the other two are inspired by, there's zucchini, chickpea, pistachios with sea salt and black pepper. That's more of a sort of Mediterranean inspiration. And the third one is carrot, zucchini, peanut with spicy chili lime. And that was inspired by sort of Thai noodle salads and the spice that comes with that. So that's the brand. So veggies and nuts,
okay,
go ahead and crunch.
I just opened it up.
we sort of, the veggies and nuts are, think about it like a trail mix with dried veggies instead of dried fruit. Definitely a savory experience. And then the crisps are really more simply seasoned. They're all actually reasonably filling. The other fun fact about air dried veggies is as you eat them and you drink water, they rehydrate a little bit in your stomach as you're eating. So they're actually quite filling as well. And we love them. My favorite, honestly, it changes by the week. I go through phases with them. I'm currently on a blushed bell pepper kick on the crisp side of things. And on the veggies and nut side of things, I do not have a favorite child. I really don't. Like, I love all of them, and I go through phases with them. And sometimes I'm like thinking one of them's not my favorite, so I take a break from it, and then I eat it again a couple weeks later, and I'm like, this is so good.
Yeah.
So I really do. I love them all.
It's hard not to fall in love with all of these. They look amazing. So far, what I've tasted is amazing. And so I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about sampling, being a sampling company, Freeosk, and you're getting to see me taste it and experience it right now. So tell me a little bit about what that looked like when you were getting real world feedback on the flavors and the inspiration and maybe the role of sampling in that as well for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with one of the things we learned really early on when we were on Amazon was like lowering the barrier to trial for this brand is really, really important. Our initial click-through and our motivation was really strong, but we were falling way below our conversion target originally. And the hypotheses behind that were taste skepticism and price too high. So what we actually ended up doing was quickly pivoting. I mean, my core packaging team was like not super happy with me at the time. I think they still have a little bit of PTSD from this one, but I'm like, can we make a variety pack? And they're like, well, you said we weren't going to make a variety pack. And I'm like, I changed my mind. We need a variety pack. We need to like make it really easy for people to try this. So we went from like 12 count straight packs to a 6 count variety pack with all 3 flavors and lowered the price to, I believe it was $14.99 at the time on Amazon, literally just trying to get it as like inexpensive, but still reasonable and not completely unprofitable as possible for people to try the brand. That helped a ton. So that sort of helped validate those hypotheses. Okay, yeah, taste skepticism. People just don't think veggie snacks are going to taste good because most of them don't. And price being like, I don't want to spend $25 or $26 on something if I don't know if I'm going to like it. And we had like a money back guarantee and all that stuff, but still like psychologically, you want it to be easy. So that we knew, okay, we got to make it easy for people to try. When we went to the farmer's market, we were sampling and selling, but like that's where we've really started to learn that like people legit didn't think this was going to taste good, and then they would taste it at the farmer's market and be like, oh my god, I've never tasted veggies like this before. Like, oh, it tastes so much better than I thought it was going to. Oh, that crunch is so great. So we started kind of understanding, and we were tracking our conversion at the farmer's market of the people who tried, how many bought, and it was really strong. So we're like, okay, sampling has to be a big part of this effort. So when we went into brick and mortar pre-COVID, that was a huge piece. We had brand teams in those stores, and it was a small number of stores, again, like test and learn, old school market test, 15, 20 stores. But we had multiple sampling events going on, trying to get people to try the brand and then tracking our conversion and making sure that like people were liking it. And it was definitely helping and moving the needle. But then for obvious reasons, sampling stopped for a really long time. We're just starting to get back to like in-store sampling now. Foot traffic is starting to come back. We're in LA only, by the way. I know I saw a question come in on the chat. So from a brick and mortar perspective right now, we're only in the Los Angeles area, and we're selling D2C on our website for now. We're working on growing distribution. But sampling is starting to come back in. The foot traffic is still not as strong. A lot of people are buying online, as we all know as consumers. And, you know, with COVID still on people's minds, like people just aren't as excited about eating something while they're out shopping. So we are trying to figure out other ways to get samples in the right consumer's hands. We're doing some partnerships, trying to partner with some fitness studios and things like that in places where we think that our consumer target is congregating. But yeah, really, really key, especially for something that's a new-ish category and a category that people maybe haven't had as positive experiences with in the past.
Yeah, no, that's very much aligns with what we've learned from insights as well, is reducing that barrier and any risk aversion, whether it's a new product or a new brand or just new category altogether is really critical.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your background, Katrina, and just you've had a breadth of experiences. So how do you see that as preparing you for this current role in innovation?
Oh, okay. How far back do you want to go? I'll do the quick one. So
I can summarize the first part because I know you're sort of ex-banker turned marketer. And I think for those of us who've had those early introductions to like marketing psychology courses, those are always the gateway in, and you realize how much fun understanding how consumers think and feel and act is really the start of long marketing careers. So what's been that sort of those pivot points for you, and what do you end up kind of referring back to in your previous careers to help you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the so I came from business school to what was Kraft Foods at the time. Now Mondelēz, obviously the company has changed significantly since I started 15 years ago. I mean, it still blows my mind that it was 15 years that I've been here, because it does feel so different than it did back then. But I would say the first real pivotal moment for me was I was working on Planters Nutrition, which was at the time the sort of health and wellness oriented subline of Planters. And it was like nut mixes, nuts and trail mixes, specifically designed to deliver health benefits to consumers. And it was working on that brand that I realized that sort of my North Star as a marketer is to help consumers live healthier lives. And that's very much in line with my personal values. I've been an athlete my whole life. I've always been into healthy eating. I'm always trying to help my friends and family be healthier. So I was like, oh, I can do this for a living. I can actually help strangers be healthier too. So that I would say was a big pivot point for me. And then with the split up from old Kraft becoming Mondelēz and Kraft Foods, I really wanted to be on the global side of the business. So I was able to kind of make my way back to biscuits and stay with Mondelēz. At the time, I moved into the global organization 8 years ago, and that's been fascinating and amazing for me as well. Just having a passion for consumers and consumer engagement and understanding consumers and understanding humans. The opportunity to do that in other markets besides the US has been phenomenal learning experience and a total blast as well. Like I joke around that like one of my core skills as a human is that I can navigate a grocery store in like any country and any language, because we've had so many opportunities to like go to other markets and learn about consumers there and learn about how they shop and where they shop. And that's been a big pivotal thing as well. And then, landing myself back in global innovation, being able to focus on well-being specifically officially. I've tried to sort of path a chart through a course through well-being stuff within the company personally for my career, but actually landing officially in a job that my job is to do well-being. It's been a dream. So fun and also scary being an entrepreneur. 13 years of big company, 12, 13 years of big company. Now all of a sudden I'm trying to grow a startup from within the company. It's totally different in some ways, but also able to obviously use a lot of the same learnings and structures from the first 13 years to do that. But yeah,
it's been fun. Great. And for those who are joining us today, feel free to start chiming in on any questions as we're getting towards the end of our chat together. We'll be sure to pepper those in. But Katrina, you just mentioned being an entrepreneur and starting a new business and a business unit within a big company. Talk a little bit about what the big tried and true trusted brands have learned from SnackFutures, and what are the parts of big business that you were able to use as you were innovating new brands?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this transactional learning, test and learn thing for almost 3 years now. It's definitely something that the bigger brands are thinking about and trying to do. So we've been having a lot of conversations with them and just sort of helping them understand how we've approached it, what we've learned, how we've done things. Some of the stuff we're doing is very similar to what they're doing, just on a much smaller and much more targeted scale. So, we learn from them as much as they learn from us. I think also having the ventures team within the US or North America business unit. So the part of the business unit that has Tate's and Perfect Snacks and Hue, they were us anywhere from 10, 15, 20 years ago. They all started as actual startups and grew their way up the curve. And now they've moved into the big company and they're sort of straddling a little bit. So we've been able to learn from them and from the mothership as much as I'd say the mothership has been able to learn from how we're operating and how we're approaching things. I think the biggest one is, when they think about doing a test and learn, I'm always encouraging people to, going back to that nerd thing again, like be really specific about what you're trying to learn. I think the bias can be towards, oh, let's do a test and learn. Let's do a test market and we're going to launch something. And then if it succeeds, we'll launch it bigger. I'm like, that's not how we're doing it. Like that's a pass fail sort of situation. We're doing it more of a like continuous learning. Again, like being real, what are your questions? What are your hypotheses? What are you learning on a weekly basis? Are you proving or disproving those hypotheses? Iterate, actually take what you're learning and use it to iterate your bundle. If you're not going to do that, then just do a launch. Don't try to do a test and learn. So I would say that's the message that we've been trying to get across and sort of help people understand how we're doing that.
Yeah. I'm going to take a couple questions that were submitted to us. So one is, did you notice a spike in sales of your healthy brands during the pandemic? And if so, do you see that trend continuing post-pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I mean, I'm thinking back to like the early days of the pandemic and we were all trying to just get whatever food we could, right? Grocery stores were like lines out the door. Nothing was on the shelf. And I would say really early on, it was like, oh, people are stockpiling Oreos and Ritz and they're not worried about health. And I'm sitting here going, what do you mean they're not worried about health? This is a health pandemic. Like this is the global health crisis. People are going to be worried about health. They might not be worried about health yet, but they are going to be worried about health really soon. So we were like definitely beating the well-being drum pretty early on when like the more indulgent things were spiking. But then, yeah, absolutely. Over time, we've seen a shift in consumers globally towards health and well-being, whether it's because they're like, okay, well now immunity is super important and I need to stay healthy, or it's because we've all been hunkered down for however long and not getting out enough and eating too much, and now people have got weight they want to lose. Like there's every reason in between. I think, yes, absolutely. I think with all things, like the pendulum may be swung all the way one way and it's going to swing a little bit back the other way. But I do think there's been a fundamental shift in consumers in their approach towards eating. People who were always out at restaurants and then had to cook at home for a year, like hopefully that got people kind of used to cooking at home that weren't cooking at home, things like that. So I do think there've been like material changes in behavior as humans and how we eat and how we approach food and how we engage with how we get that food, whether it's shopping in e-commerce or whatever. Yeah, I do think some of these trends are here to stay.
Yeah, it has been really fascinating. I know there's a lot of McKinsey reports out there about 75% of shoppers have changed their behavior and plan to keep some of those behavioral changes, or whether it's looking at categories that shifted over this time. And yes, I feel like my pantry looked, one half was completely indulgent and the other half was healthy. And that was sort of how you met balance during the pandemic. Another question we have for you is, what are the biggest challenges for this next phase of growth? And what are the social media strategies that are going to help you tackle those challenges?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, so for Dirt Kitchen specifically, I would say our current challenge is, how do we grow awareness of this tiny little brand, specifically in the Los Angeles area where we've got brick and mortar distribution, and be able to grow velocities. So again, kind of getting people over that hurdle of taste skepticism and cost and high cost. And unfortunately, dried veggies are not cheap. Like they're not cheap, and therefore the product's not cheap. So we've got to figure out how we can use our marketing to get people intrigued in the brand, by the brand, and get them through the funnel to purchase, and then hopefully like it enough that they'll purchase again. So I would say that's really our challenge for the foreseeable future, is like growing awareness and trial, hopefully getting some of that repeat. And if we're not getting the repeat, figuring out why and making changes accordingly. And then as we look to grow beyond the LA area, doing the same. The good thing about being in one market is, you can geo-target all your social, digital advertising. Of course, it's just way cheaper to geo-target. It's not cheaper per million, but it's cheaper overall to focus on one market than the whole country. That said, we've also got the D2C business that's obviously anywhere in the US that you can buy. So it's really balancing those two priorities, but with a specific focus right now on growing velocity so that we can not only maintain, but grow our shelf space.
Did anything surprise you as you were digging into those insights and then uncovering who your shopper was? So I think there is a human truth that makes sense, right? That it's hard to wrap your head around veggies that are tasty, but as you got to know your shopper and your key consumer and that person that you're trying to target in social, did anything surprise you about who they were and who your biggest opportunity was with?
I would say early on, it wasn't that surprising. Like who we thought would be motivated by our message was motivated by our message. I would say now that we're growing and we're starting to see different people than that come in and different usage occasions come in, we're literally in the process of doing this now. Like I'm in the process of recruiting some first-time buyers, some repeat buyers, and some cart abandoners from the D2C site and doing one-on-one interviews to try to figure out what's happening. But we have some hypotheses, of course, on what's happening and what some of those surprises might be. On the crisp side of things, the zucchini crisps are definitely the hot item. Like when I was out in LA a couple weeks ago, visiting stores, and that is definitely the one with the strongest velocity. So our hypothesis is our people are turning to zucchini crisps instead of potato chips for that like crunch, afternoon crunch craving. And if that's the case, like we might take that in a more chip-like direction. I don't know. So that one, a little bit of surprise to me. It's a slightly different insight. We're going to try to understand, dig a little deeper, peel back the onion and figure out, all right, why are we trying to get more veggies in our lives? Is it really just about overall health or is it about something else? And if so, what might we do with that information? So more to come there. Always surprises.
Yeah. And that comment you made about the zucchini chips being a substitute for chips is a great segue into a question we have around brand shifts. So while all successful brand shifts and change over time, what do you think is going to be foundational for the Dirt Kitchen brands?
That's a really good question. Yeah. And we actually had an early decision that had to be made around that, whether it was going to be all about rescuing veggies or is it really just going to be about making veggies delicious? And some learning and experiments we did led us in the making veggie snacking, not even making veggies delicious. Sorry, I even said that wrong. We think veggies are delicious, making them snackable. So is it about rescuing and that sustainability story, or is it just about making veggie snackable? We landed on the just making veggie snackable. For now, the world is changing. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, what does that mean? Is it literally just helping people who already want to eat veggies, or would it grow to be, maybe there's some people that aren't that excited about veggies, and can we make veggies even more exciting for them too? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see where consumers lead us.
Well, I can't. This consumer is going to lead it right to like go snack on my all my fun things over here. Katrina, thank you so much. This was really awesome chatting with you, and thanks for sharing all of your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. This was great, Katrina, just to hear about the approaches that Mondelēz is using to invent new products that empower people to snack right. I love that. I actually knew a little bit about Dirt Kitchen snacks before this session today, but it was really interesting to learn the story about how the products were concepted, created, how you're planning to promote them to consumers, and kind of learn a little bit more about each of the varieties. I haven't tried them yet, but you know what? I'm going to Amazon or your site right now because those, blushed bell pepper crisps sound awesome. I got to get me some of those. So
let me know what you think of them, please. Always take
Yes, I will. I'll pass that along. This was a great session. A perfect one to close out our day, talking about consumer engagement. Really appreciate both of your time, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks so much. Have a good one. Bye.
Well, thank you everyone else for joining us, all the participants. Thank you very much for watching today. What an incredible day of programming and content from our speakers and moderators. I think one thing we heard from each marketer was that the more personalized you can make a consumer experience with your brand, the more likely they are to engage with you. And the way to do that is to really listen to your consumers and their needs and wants and deliver on those. Makes perfect sense. Thank you to all of our speakers and moderators for some great discussions today. We hope you will all join us tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern time for Brand Innovators Behind the Brand Summit. We will be joined by marketing leaders from PayPal, 1-800-Flowers.com, PepsiCo, and many more. Thank you for joining, everyone. We hope to see you again soon.